Gonz Shimura. Gonz is a partner with us in the Prophecy Forum. Actually, he was the founder of this a year or two ago. We've done a few other conferences before we came to Columbus, but this is our first large conference, and hopefully we're going to do several more across the country and get those live streamed out around the world as well. Gonz is a friend, and he's a partner with Basil, who's sitting here in the front row on Canary Cry Radio that many of you may be familiar with. If you're not, you certainly want to tune in on internet radio to Canary Cry. They have some of the greatest guests in the world on a lot of fringe topics that are very, very relevant. This morning, and I also want to call your attention to something Gonz did that we're pretty amazed with. Gonz is a very bright, young, talented, creative, biblical scholar, if you will. And Gonz produced a video on his own for very few bucks that has had over 3 million hits on YouTube. And it's about a 2-hour deal. He's got a follow-up on Age of Deceit 2. They're 2 or 3 hour videos. You can get the DVDs out here today. But you're going to get a taste of it on his topic this morning on supernatural weapons and what's going on with different military applications in Israel, with the Russians, with the United States, and so forth. So I don't want to steal your show, Gonz. Let me welcome Gonz Shimura.
Thanks, Gary. Well, good morning. I'm half asleep, just so you guys know. California time to get out here is it's brutal. I haven't never done this before, so I'm still trying to adjust. My name is Gonzo Shimura. I go by Gonz. My talk today is called The Secret Weapons of Antichrist. And a lot of this information that you're going to hear today is going to be in my book. My first book, it's set to release in 2015. It's going to be called The Cosmic Endgame. But a little bit about myself. Gary kind of did a short introduction, but I consider myself a media minister because I make videos. I have the podcast. I have different things that I do that are very technical in nature. But really, that's kind of a glorified title for internet evangelist. But really, I can really just summarize everything with this. This is pretty much what I do on a daily basis. But just to be upfront and transparent, Gary called me a Bible scholar, but I'm not really a scholar. I consider myself a student of Bible prophecy. I don't have any degrees or fancy titles. I was saved back in 2007, and I only started looking at this stuff in 2010, so I'm a pretty late comer. So as a caveat, some of the things I expressed today may change. I just want to put that out there in case this is being watched later, and you know how it goes. I do have a master's in music production and technology. Yeah, what's up?
KGB. Спасибо большое.
All right. I have a master's in music production and technology from Berklee College of Music, but I'm actually a college dropout. I studied sociology at the University of California, Irvine, and I'm 8 units shy of getting my degree. And so people always ask me, like, Gonz, why don't you just finish your classes? You have your degree and all this stuff. But the classes that I hadn't finished are basic math requirements, and I know that's kind of awkward for an Asian to not finish math, but that's just how it is. It was because it was a statistics class, and I just didn't like statistics at all. I don't know, I couldn't understand it. But for me, statistics was just a very simple thing to just quote. So I'm going to start with some statistics. The era of classification, well, in 2005, the House Committee on Government Reform proposed the question, how much overclassification exists in government documentation? And really, this was a study done to find out how difficult it was to access information for civilians, scholars, government employees that are trying to find information about the government. So it was really interesting to look at this. So first, the Pentagon's deputy under Secretary of Defense for Counterintelligence and Security said that over 50% of government documents are classified. The numbers keep going up. The ISCA said 60%. Tom Keene, who's the chair of the 9/11 Commission, said 75%. And then, this is astonishing, President Reagan's own National Security Council said that 90% of government documents are classified. So to give you an idea of how much this is actually, how many pieces of paper this might be, the Library of Congress adds roughly 60 million pages of documents each year for public accessibility, but 560 million pages goes classified each year. So the problem is that historians, scholars, researchers that are trying to put together a picture of what our government is doing, they have to figure out what they're doing based on just 10% of the documentation, which results in kind of a glossed over version of reality. So the question arises, how do we get to the truth of what's going on? And luckily, for us, we have biblical prophecy. And it's been a really interesting journey for me to look at how Bible prophecy speaks into so many things. It's the only source we can trust. One of the teachers that I really liked and really enjoyed early on, Chuck Missler, one of the things he said really struck me, and that's that God authenticated his message by writing history before it happens. And so I really love that because ultimately Bible prophecy becomes the tool that we use to declassify the hidden agenda of the enemy. And of course, we're never going to get the full picture of what's really going on, and I don't think that's necessarily important. But I think that a lot of it has to do with a passage that I really hold on to strongly, which is Ephesians 5:11 through 12, where it says, "Take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them, for it is shameful even to speak of the things they do in secret." So the takeaway here is that the unfruitful works of darkness happen in secrecy. And that's what I want to talk to you guys about today, is an area of secrecy that's not discussed too much in the world of Bible prophecy. In some ways it overlaps with various topics, but it's the topic of the secret space program. There's two questions that arise from this. The first one is, does a secret space program exist? And if so, how and why? On the question of does it exist, my honest answer is I don't know. I don't know if it exists. I would say maybe, but in my opinion, I would say it definitely does. The scope and depth of what that means is, it's left for speculation. But I think there's enough evidence to suggest that at the very least there is a secret program where advanced technologies are being used and have been used and developed for decades. And I guess the more important question is, how does it relate to some of the new possibilities of understanding the unfolding of Bible prophecy, specifically regarding the Antichrist? And so what I'll be talking about today, the secret space program topic is just so huge. There's so many tentacles, and you can get into all kinds of weird stuff. I mean, just anything from, raccoon statues on Mars to, it's just all over the place. But I want to try to keep it as level as possible this morning. And really, a few weeks ago when I decided on my topic, I was a little bit more fringy than everything else. The geopolitics was the main topic, but really space kind of hit the news big time the last few weeks. Just a few weeks ago, Elon Musk warned about artificial intelligence, and Elon Musk is known for Tesla and PayPal, but he's also the founder of SpaceX, and what he wants to do is go to Mars. And he's actually one of 3 so-called trillionaires who started private space corporations, the other 2 being Jeff Bezos of Amazon with his Blue Origin, and Richard Branson of Virgin Galactic. The Antares rocket explodes. This is back in just a couple weeks ago. This was a privately owned spacecraft, the Orbital Science Corporation, and it was trying to bring some objects up to the ISS, and it exploded. I'm sure you guys saw some of the news. It was a big explosion. And then just a day later, the Virgin Galactic Spaceship 2 crashed, killing the pilot. And so that was 2 privately owned spacecrafts, failing back to back. And then a week or so later, we get the movie Interstellar, which, I had seen the previews, but when I watched it with a little bit more discerning eyes, and I haven't seen the movie yet, tell me if I'm completely off base here, but for me, I felt that it was somewhat of a propaganda piece for the breakaway civilization in a space program, and I'll talk about the breakaway civilization in a moment. And then we had just this week, we had the Rosetta land on a comet. So there's all this stuff happening in outer space, our space program's doing things. But the question is there anything in Scripture that hints at anything to do with space? And that was a really important question for me because I didn't want to waste my time looking at a topic when there wasn't any kind of biblical support or passages that might support something that had to do with space. And I found a couple that were interesting. I'm not suggesting that these are slam dunk passages to explain what's going on in outer space, especially with the secret space program. But the first one that I found was in Obadiah, where it says, "Though you soar aloft like the eagle, though your nest is set among the stars, from there I will bring you down, declares the Lord." And on one hand, this could really just be allegorical language, divine hostility towards Edom, which is what the chapter is about. But it could be some sort of foreshadowing of future judgment. The other passage that I found that was interesting, it's very similar. "If they climb up to heaven, from there I will bring you down." Amos 9:2. There's a similar passage in Jeremiah 49:16. So the question is, who are these, the people that are actually going out there? Now this phrase, the breakaway civilization, was coined by Richard Dolan. He's one of the leading ufologists today. He has several books on the topic. And he coined the title breakaway civilization based on what's called the Kardashev scale. Nikolai Kardashev, a Soviet astronomer, proposed this idea in 1962 during the heart of the Cold War and during the early years of the space race. It is a hypothetical method of measuring a civilization's level of technological advancement, and it was based on the amount of energy that a civilization can harness. So a type 1 civilization would harness the energy of a home planet. Type 2 would have the energy of a nearby star. In our case, it would be the sun. Type 3, the energy of a galaxy. And Nikolai Kardashev stopped there. He said, I don't think there's any civilization that can go beyond that. But of course, astronomers took it further. There's type 4 and type 5, suggesting that it would control the universe. And it got me thinking, what would the kingdom of God be? What type civilization would the kingdom of God be? And I would suggest that perhaps it is a type 5 civilization where we have a God who is supernatural outside of the universe itself controlling it. Just food for thought. I'm not saying that that's, we have to run around saying the kingdom of God is type 5 civilization. But the earth is type 0. And, well, allegedly. You may have seen a clip by Michio Kaku, who is a physicist. It's a very famous video clip where he talks about we're a type 0 civilization, and it will take us 100 to 200 years to get to type 1 and all this stuff. Well, maybe, but maybe there's a group already here, a highly secretive group, an organization who's behind the scenes of all of the global, financial, political, and even geopolitical affairs, who are able to maintain their position as the powers that be because they have access to technologies that are so far advanced from public knowledge that they can be used to leverage their own agendas. And so this group would literally be breaking away from where we are as a civilization, hence the phrase a breakaway civilization. Now, this sounds awfully familiar to some things we read in the Bible, and specifically in the passages in Genesis 11 about the Tower of Babel. I believe this is verse 2. It says, "Then they said, 'Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its tops in the heavens.'" And then, it was verse 4. And then verse 6, "And the Lord said, Behold, they are one people, and they have all one language, and this is only the beginning of what they will do, and nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them." This is a pretty bold statement by God, suggesting that by building this tower, they will have the ability to do pretty much anything. And, the fringe sort of scholars, researchers, they suggest that perhaps this is a Stargate, some kind of portal. And I'm not opposed to that idea. Actually, in my book that I'll be releasing next year, I speculate on the possibility that it was a very, very large hadron collider based on an extra biblical text in the book of Jasher. It talks about the circumference of the Tower of Babel, and based on how big that is, comparing it to what we're trying to do with the Large Hadron Collider, it becomes very interesting what that might have been. But how do we describe a breakaway civilization today? Well, there was a sociologist by the name of Max Weber, and he was talking about the bureaucracy back about 100 years ago. And he really summarized it pretty well. Here's what he said: "Bureaucracy is fully developed in political and ecclesiastical communities. In the private economy, the decisive reason for the advance of bureaucratic organization has always been its purely technical superiority." It's interesting that he would know this 100 years ago. It really does describe it well. The political aspect, obviously, we've all heard about the New World Order, I'm sure, in this room. Ecclesiastical is, I highlighted this because it really ties into the next talk, which will be Chris Putnam's talk on astrobiology, the Vatican, and the coming world religion. I think it'll make a lot of sense when he's up here talking about that. And then obviously the private economy, which I'll get into in a moment, and then the purely technical superiority. But if there is a secret space program, how would they do this? I mean, they would require a lot of time. It would require a lot of personnel. But most importantly, it would require a tremendous amount of money to do this. So the question is, how would a breakaway civilization finance the research and development of exotic technologies, maintain secrecy and anonymity from the public, and maintain secrecy in the deployment of such developments? So the first thing that comes to mind when you look at hidden finance is the word black budget. So I Googled black budget, and I got about 147 million results, which is a lot. But one of the first personalized results I got, thank you, Google, because everything's personalized. It may not be your personalized results, but what I got was a August 19th, 2013 article called 52.6 billion, the black budget, covert action, surveillance, counterintelligence. The U.S. black budget spans over a dozen agencies that make up the National Intelligence Program. And it went on to talk about the CIA, the NSA, the FBI, the DOD, just all splitting this 52.6 billion. 52.6 billion is a lot of money, but I don't know if that can fund a secret space program. Well, interestingly enough, on September 10th of 2001, Donald Rumsfeld came out and said, "We're missing $2.3 trillion from the budget for the Pentagon." And everyone went, "What?" And then everyone forgot about it because the next day the towers were hit. In subsequent years, they came out and said, "Well, we brought that number back to zero." I don't know how they did that, but okay. Maybe that's where our tax dollars are going. So what's going on? What's really going on here? How is this possible? Well, anybody who studies sort of the hidden finance and the hidden space program and all this hidden secrecy stuff, it all goes back to World War II, and specifically the plunder that happened. Now, this part of what I'm going to talk about, and I reference this person a lot. His name is Joseph P. Farrell. He has a book called Covert Wars and Breakaway Civilization, The Secret Space Program, Celestial Psyops, and Hidden Conflicts. He's a great researcher. He is not a believer. He's got a master's or doctorate in patristics, and he's been trained in theology. He went to Oxford. I mean, he's very scholarly, but he's pretty hostile towards the Christian worldview. He's got a book called Yahweh, the Two-Faced God, and stuff like that. So he's not very, good about that end of it. But his research is really good. And in this book, he actually talks about a lot of hidden structures of finance. Operation Bernhard, 2011 bearer bond scandal, the Vatican's connection to the fascist Masonic Lodge of Liceo Gelli, in cahoots with the large-scale mafia counterfeiting ring back in 1971. But one of the things that he talked about that was particularly interesting was a pattern that emerges with a lot of these hidden financial structures. And the first is that the elite, some sort of elite, whether it be a government or whether it be anything, they give out the agenda, they give the orders, basically. And then a military or intelligence group goes out and basically does all the dirty work. But here's what's interesting. The third element is that they also summon the criminal underground to clean up the mess a little bit, to make sure that everything is taken care of. And this pattern is very prominent in something called Operation Golden Lily. And this was particularly interesting to me because it happened, based on my home nation of Japan. I actually am born in America, so I'm American, but it was interesting to me to look at some of the history here. And a lot of people focus on the plunder and the looting that happened in Europe during World War II, but not a lot of people focused on the eastern side in Asia, which was pretty significant, pretty substantial. The story of Operation Golden Lily actually starts back thousands of years. It goes back to China and its wealth based on the Silk Road, all the trades that happened for thousands of years. China became very, very wealthy. And in fact, the 19th century opium wars were based on the fact that Europe tried to go in there and take some of that plunder, some of that wealth. And then soon after, but around 1937 to 1930s, China and Japan got into some pretty heavy conflicts. And in the year 1937 was the rape of Nanking, where literally hundreds of thousands of people were killed, resulting in Japan taking over the then capital of China, which was Nanking. Right after this happened, Emperor Hirohito and Prince Chichibu, which was his younger brother, were summoned to basically take over all of the wealth that was in Asia. And that was called Operation Golden Lily. And the way it was described was, quote, a vast amount of military plunder throughout Asia in a coordinated looting campaign. The person to actually carry this out, I didn't realize that my little word thing overlaps my little image. I'm sorry about that. Okay. I'm a little perfectionist on stuff. It gets bad. But General Yamashita was the guy who basically went out and took all the plunder and brought it into the Philippines. And this happened the day after Pearl Harbor. The Emperor Hirohito also summoned the Yakuza, which is the Japanese mafia, to plunder the Asian underground market and black economy to, quote, ensure that the looting activity was not limited to legitimate open markets. And so it was summarized as, it was as if a giant vacuum cleaner passed across the East and Southeast Asia. Now, the loot in the Philippines was buried across 175 different sites. This was one of the jobs of General Yamashita. And they would label each site with a number that was representing the amount of wealth that was in each of those caves. It's a very interesting, speculation of how much that was, how much wealth was actually there. And according to the Para-Political Journal, in a piece called Operation Golden Lily and the Secret Legacy of the Black Eagle Trust, stated this, quote, "For instance, you would see a site labeled 777 as meaning there is at least 777 billion yen in yen worth of gold, jewels, and treasures buried there. At the time, the yen was trading for about 3.5 to 4 to the US dollar, which means that 777 billion yen would be worth about 200 billion in 1945 US dollars. Try multiplying that 170 times, which is the number of burial sites, and you get $34 trillion. Adjust for inflation using an accurate inflation calculator. This comes out to nearly 13 times that at $440 trillion. I don't know if you guys know how much 440 trillion is. I wasn't quite sure, so I looked it up. If you make $40,000 a year, it would take you 25 years to make $1 million. It would take you 25,000 years to make $1 billion. It would take you 25 million years to make $1 trillion. So if you do the math, it would take you 11 billion years if you make 40,000 a year to make $440 trillion. So that's kind of a lot of money. Right after that, General MacArthur goes in and defeats the Japanese Imperial Army. And here's where the tie-in with the secret space program starts to happen. A man named Edward G. Lansdale, who Joseph Farrell describes as a major advocate of covert operations and psychological warfare, being a CIA general. He got wind of the looting that happened in the Philippines and became the point man to organize the replundering of the plunder. Now, according to Farrell, General MacArthur had some documents post-World War II to talk about some of this vast amount of wealth. And according to him, in this document by General MacArthur, it was a briefing. It stated, quote, "One of the spectacular tasks of the occupation dealt with collecting and putting under guard the great hoards of gold, silver, precious stones, foreign postage stamps, engraving plates, even though the bulk of this wealth was collected and placed under United States military custody by Japanese officials. Undeclared caches of these treasures were known to exist. Consequently, the task of investigating, uncovering, inventorying, and safeguarding all property in this category was a continuing and increasing responsibility." So what happened was in 1944-45, this is interesting, this is when this all happened, 1945, the International Monetary Fund was created. The World Bank was created. The president of the World Bank, John J. McCloy, was involved in the pre-Nazi or pre-World War II Nazi chemical cartel called IG Farben. He was also part of Operation Paperclip. And he was instrumental in the, quote, "the establishment of the plan to replunder the Axis plunder and to turn it into a secret financial system to fund covert operations." And so at this point, President Truman had to make a decision. Go public with this or keep it secret. And he decided to obviously keep it a secret. I don't think anybody heard about this at the time. Some of the public statements that were made were that the plunder was going to be used for the Cold War. And what happened here, though, was that the United States was forced into international financing, which opened doors for privatization of corporations and the decentralization of nation states, as you often hear about when you study the New World Order. And one of the things that happened, some researchers suggest, is that in the 1960s, by the time I believe it was Nixon was in office, the president no longer had control over this operation of how this money was being divvied up. And then, of course, you look at the 1940s and you have the National Security Act of 1947, you have the Roswell crash, you have Israel becoming a nation. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that happened in the 1940s. It's very bizarre that everything happened in that time. But the takeaway here, when looking at this, is that, biblically speaking, this was really a big, major step into an era where a global mark of the beast system really became plausible, because it quite literally was the birth of an international financial structure, which then led to the funding of several covert projects to then develop the technology necessary for a mark of the beast and in conjunction an image of the beast system. So moving on, the logical next question really is, given endless funds of hidden systems of finance, what did the breakaway civilization accomplish in the last 70 years? MacArthur was an interesting character. He was involved, obviously, in the part of the process of getting the United States to go replunder the plunder. When he spoke at West Point in May of 1962, he had a very interesting speech and a very interesting set of comments. He said, quote, "We deal now not with the things of this world alone, but with the illimitable distances and as yet unfathomed mysteries of the universe. We are reaching out for a new and boundless frontier. We speak in strange terms of harnessing the cosmic energy, of making winds and tides fork for us, of creating unheard of synthetic materials to supplement or even replace old standard basics, to purify the seawater for our drink, of mining ocean floors for new fields of wealth and food, of disease preventatives to expand life into the hundreds of years, of controlling the weather for a more equitable distribution of heat and cold, rain and shine, of spaceships to the moon, of the primary target in war no longer being limited to the armed forces of an enemy, but instead to include his civil populations, of ultimate conflict between a united human race and the sinister forces of some other planetary galaxy, of such dreams and fantasies as to make life the most exciting of all times." That's a lot of stuff that he said there. And MacArthur was probably privy to some of the things that were going on by 1962 with some of that financing. So what we heard here was space stuff. There was references to geoengineering, which suggests a type 1 civilization moving into it. We heard transhumanism in here, expanding life into the hundreds of years. And interestingly, an outside threat. Of course, this was echoed by Reagan, which we'll touch on a little later. And Bill Clinton recently was on the Jimmy Kimmel Show, said pretty much the exact same thing. And it just makes me wonder, I wonder if the threat that they keep talking about from outer space is actually the return of Jesus Christ. Another person that I found pretty credible, and it was astonishing for me to hear what she was saying. Her name is Catherine Austin Fitz. And this is a pretty long quote here. I'm not going to read this whole thing. Basically, she talks about how there's a lot of money missing since 1948. But she is a director and a member of the board of directors, or used to be, of the Wall Street investment bank Dillon Reed and Company. She was the Assistant Secretary of Housing and Federal Housing, the Commissioner at the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development in the Bush administration. So she's been in the system. So it's really startling when she starts saying stuff like this, particularly this next quote by her. She says, "I have this other phenomenon where you have trillions of dollars of hardware flying around in advanced technology, and you have a corporate infrastructure which is in essence out of control. A private group of corporations got control of the black technology, and the government lost control. To keep this secret, you had to keep it 2 steps removed from governmental bureaucrats." So it's interesting, again, that such a high-level, experienced person in finances would say something like this. I mean, trillions of dollars of hardware flying around in advanced technology, saying a lot. We come to a guy named Ben Rich. He's the father of stealth. He was the head of Lockheed Martin Skunk Works between 1975 and 1991. He has some very interesting quotes. One of them, "I wish I could tell you about the projects we are currently working on. They are both fascinating and fantastic. They call for technologies once only dreamed of by science fiction writers." This was back in 1988. In 1993, in front of UCLA, he said, "We already have the means to travel among the stars. But these technologies are locked up in black projects, and it would take an act of God to ever get them out to benefit humanity." Same talk, he said, "There's an error in the equations, and we have figured it out, and now know how to travel to the stars, and it won't take a lifetime to do it." Ben Rich passed away in 1995 before he was able to give everything. But was he just being tongue-in-cheek, or was he actually trying to tell us something? It's very interesting. Then there's Gary McKinnon. If you guys have heard of Gary McKinnon, he's a Scottish computer hacker. I said amateur because he didn't really claim to be a hacker. He was just a guy on a computer trying to hack into stuff. He was on a 56K modem. So it's not like he was, super techie. And back in 2001, he was accused of hacking into 97 US military and NASA computers. It's pretty good for 56K. He claimed to find evidence of a secret space program. And one of the things that's interesting here is that former U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder, one of the first things he had to deal with back in 2012 was the request to extradite McKinnon so they can put him on trial and try him as a terrorist. They wanted to try him as a terrorist and bring him to Guantanamo Bay and all this stuff. I mean, if he's just a hacker, why all that stuff to do that? Here's the quote of what he actually found. "I found a list of officers' names under the heading non-terrestrial officers. It doesn't mean little green men. What I think it means is not Earth-based. I found a list of fleet-to-fleet transfers and a list of ship names. I looked them up. They weren't U.S. Navy ships. What I saw made me believe they have some kind of spaceship off-planet." So maybe he just said too much. Maybe he found too much for the comfort of the breakaway civilization. Then we have President Ronald Reagan. Now, I don't remember much of Reagan. I was born in the early 80s, so I hear about Reagan, though. And I get to read about him, which is nice. He had some interesting quotes as well. This is a journal of his, dated June 11th, 1985, in his diaries. He stated, quote, "Lunch with 5 top scientists. It was fascinating. Space truly is the last frontier. And some of the developments there in astronomy, etc., are like science fiction, except they are real. I learned that our shuttle capacity is such that we can orbit 300 people. I think he spilled the beans a little bit, because even now, the most number of people we can carry on a shuttle that goes into space is 8 people, publicly speaking. Now, some people speculate that this was the Aurora project that Lockheed was doing that basically was discontinued, but maybe it was something else. And of course, Reagan is popular for his quote about how he occasionally thinks of how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. Interesting. It echoes what MacArthur said back in 1962. The other part of Reagan's time in office was in 1983, he initiated the Strategic Defense Initiative. By 1984, along with the Strategic Defense Initiative organization and the DoD, the public named this Star Wars. It was effectively a peace shield. What they wanted to do was basically create a system, Earth-based and space-based weaponry to protect the United States from any oncoming ballistic missiles from hostile nations. He did this in spite of some things. The Outer Space Treaty was signed in 1967 between the United States and the Soviet Union. The agreement was that they won't put any kind of nuclear weapons of mass destruction in orbit or on any kind of space objects like the moon or anything like that. And then in 1972, you had the Anti-Ballistics Missile Treaty. So how was he able to do this? How was he able to put and develop space-based weapons if there's the Outer Space Treaty, the Anti-Ballistics Missiles Treaty? Well, he found a loophole, and this loophole had to do with, instead of putting weapons of mass destruction, he started building weapons of pinpoint destruction. Particle beam weapons. The Chair Heritage, they developed several projects. One was called Sipapu, another one called Seesaw. These are just particle beam weapons. Then you had Brilliant Pebbles, which was a series of small rockets that would all, find the ballistic missile and take it out. More recently, they had Project Thor, which is called the Rods of God. This is an interesting one. It's a kinetic bombardment weapon. And there's a document that you can find on the internet. It's the U.S. Air Force Transformation Flight Plan. It's dated November of 2003, and it's labeled Hypervelocity Rod Bundles, which effectively would provide, quote, the capacity to strike ground targets anywhere in the world from outer space. Basically what it is, it's a tungsten rod that they shoot out of space and travels 7,000 miles per hour going straight into the earth. I mean, you can be in an underground bunker and they can just take you out. And they also talked about robust autonomous attack missiles. And this is interesting. All this is interesting because, recently I heard a Chuck Missler teaching again that talked about Jeremiah 50, verse 9, where it says, their arrows are like a skilled warrior who does not return empty-handed. And if you look at the word there, a skilled warrior, in the Hebrew, sakal, it can mean expert, instruct, prosper, and even intelligent. So the suggestion here is that these are intelligent arrows. And the fact that they don't return empty-handed, meaning that they always hit their target. Now this is a brief clip. This is, again, back in 2003. It's interesting because we just went over a document, the Air Force saying that we're going to have all these kinetic weapons and these particle beam weapons. Well, this is Donald Rumsfeld in 2003 being asked about particle beam weapons. Just watch how uncomfortable he is.
Can I ask you a question about some of the technology that you're developing to fight the war on terror, specifically directed energy and high-powered microwave technology? When do you envision that you can weaponize that type of technology?
Goodness. It is in, for the most part, the kinds of things you're talking about are in varying early stages. Do you have anything you would add?
I don't think I would add much. I think they are in early stages and probably not ready for employment at this point.
In the normal order of things, when you invest in research and development and begin a developmental project, you don't have any intention or expectations that one would use it. On the other hand, the real world intervenes from time to time, and you reach in there and take something out that is still in a developmental stage, and you might use it. So your question's not answerable. It depends on what happens in the future and how well things move along the track, and whether or not someone feels it's appropriate to reach into a development stage and see if something might be useful, as was the case with the unmanned aerial vehicles.
But you sound like you're willing to experiment with it.
Yeah, I think that's the point, and I think, we have, I think, from the beginning of this conflict, I think General Franks has been very open to looking at new things if there are new things available, and there's been been willing to put them into the fight, even before they've been fully wrung out. And I think that's not referring to these two particular cases of directed energy or high-powered microwave, but sure.
Yes.
We will continue.
I can never be a politician or be in politics ever. This leads to the question, why are they doing this? What is their goal? And I reference, again, Joseph P. Farrell. I keep referencing him, but he really does do good research. Farrell suggests that a breakaway civilization probably adheres to some different cosmologies, theology, and perhaps they're even in contact with demonic forces or ETs, quote unquote. And simply by tradition of the elite, the occult elite that have passed down information for such a long time, they would definitely gain or be looking for certain kinds of knowledge, ancient knowledge. And so this is what Farrell states. They had to consider the hypothesis that those old Egyptian, Mesopotamian, Vedic, and other myths of ancient wars of the gods and the repeated interventions and interference with mankind, the Tower of Babel moment, might be true. The various versions of the Tower of Babel moment indicated that interventions occurred when human technological progress approached parity with the gods, and that humanity was once again entering this dangerous phase of history. Now, he believes that, obviously, that we have to avoid that Tower of Babel moment because he believes Yahweh is kind of a bad guy. So, we can't have Yahweh take out our advancement in technology like he did back in the Tower of Babel. In his book, The Cosmic War, Interplanetary Warfare in Modern Physics and Ancient Texts, Farrell argues that the Sumerian cuneiforms are responsible for a lot of what they're looking for. So one of the things that he talks about is that perhaps there were planetary scale weapons. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped something. There was an ancient war of the gods. Now, this is interesting. We have to kind of deal with this because, first off, the Bible does have some references to Rahab and how God pierced Rahab and broke it into pieces. And some have speculated that it's talking about an ancient planet. I can't tell you for sure, but that's an interpretation. And, the idea is that the asteroid belt of today used to be a planet, and it was destroyed in some kind of ancient catastrophe, perhaps some kind of pre-Adamic war, which, again, I don't know for sure, but that's what some researchers suggest. This used planetary level scale technology. If you're going to destroy a planet, you obviously have some pretty intense stuff going on. One of the things that they use, Farrell suggests they used, was something called the Tablets of Destinies. And I don't have time to get into all that, but if you saw the movie The Guardians of the Galaxy this summer, there was an orb called the Infinity Stone inside of it, and whoever held it had all sorts of powers to destroy all kinds of stuff. I think this was a meme, kind of a representation of what types of things they're looking for. Is it just myth, or is it actually real? Well, knowledge of such weapons, I believe, have been passed down through esoteric tradition since the flood. And again, this is all super hyper speculation. According to Farrell, the esoteric traditions seem to indicate that there are 3 or 4 places where some of this technology may have been hidden. Now, if he goes through the Sumerian text and he shows how much of that technology was destroyed because it was so destructive. But a couple of them were not destructible. They couldn't take it apart, so they decided to go hide it. Some potential places are Egypt, Mesopotamia, the moon, and Mars. I don't want to touch on the moon or Mars too much today, but Egypt is interesting, obviously, with the pyramids there. Mesopotamia might tell us why there's such a interest in the Middle East. But really, getting back to the Bible with all of this, it goes back to Revelation 13. This is an interesting passage, Revelation 13:2, and we'll look at 4. It says, "And to it," which is the beast, the Antichrist, "the dragon gave his power and his throne and great authority." Gave his power throne, great authority. You know, the Greek here with power is physical power, might, force, energy even, marvelous works. A throne is obviously a throne, a seat, a power or dominion. And great authority being moral authority or spiritual authority. And then Revelation 13:4, and they worshipped the dragon, which again gave power unto the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? And when you look at this, the fact that he's giving him something, you know, the dragon is giving the Antichrist something that allows him to be a war-making machine. And so what I'm speculating here is that Satan might offer whoever the Antichrist ends up being some weapons that cause some sort of catastrophic damage, either in the past or perhaps in the future. And one of two possibilities with this whole space program thing. One, it's all to help humanity re-reach the level of technology that once reigned in the ancient past, specifically leading towards the Tower of Babel. Or two, to help humanity discover that, whatever that artifact is, whatever that weapon is. And if you think about all the turmoil going on in the world, it's possible that that's what they're doing, all these different governments, and even the looting that happened of the museum in Iraq just a year ago. It's just very peculiar that all this is happening. And one of the things I didn't mention that I didn't talk about too deeply here is the transhumanist agenda, which really ties into all of this. I talk about that a lot in Age of Deceit too, that humanity is trying to reach towards godhood, the lie from Genesis 3, and they're really taking that to heart and trying to move forward with it. And part of that agenda is to become superior beings so that they can go outer space and conquer planets and all kinds of stuff. So that's part of their plan as well. Then we look at the secret weapons of the Antichrist, and really the idea of false signs of wonders of Satan. It's possible that God allows Satan to have supernatural, things happening at the end, but I tend to think that as technology develops, it's developing to an end, and this end is to have these false signs and wonders that are going to awe the world. So the big idea here, and the biggest weapon of the Antichrist, is deception. How many of you guys feel, just a raise of hand is okay, how many of you guys feel you have a pretty good grasp on how things will unfold in biblical prophecy? Oh, come on, you guys know that you guys have an opinion about how things are going to unfold. Okay. Okay. How many of you are willing to be wrong about whatever your notion is? Okay, good. Because whatever you think you might know about biblical prophecy and how it unfolds, whether it be the rapture or the next war, Gog, Magog, or whatever it is, who the Antichrist might be, Satan wants to deceive us. He wants to deceive the elect. He wants to deceive the people who are saved. He's already deceived the world. He doesn't have to do much to deceive the world or continue to deceive the world, but he wants to take down those who are believers. It says, do not be deceived 4 times in the New Testament. That quote, do not be deceived. Matthew 24 obviously talks about that. And I'm going to wrap it up here with a survey that was done, which I found interesting, by the Barna Group. 1,000 Americans were asked, do you personally believe that the world is currently living in the end times as described by prophecies in the Bible or not? I found the numbers fairly interesting. 41% of people over 18 said yes. Of course, it's only 1,000, so. And it's the Barna Group, so, they're a little bit biased. But I thought it was a bigger number than I was expecting. 54% of Protestants said yes. And I'm teeing up Chris Putnam for this next one. 77% of Catholics said no. And I'm going to end it there. Thank you, guys. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Gonz.